The ships came on a Tuesday morning when the sky was still pink with dawn. They appeared over every major city on Earth at the same moment, as if they had been waiting in the darkness of space for the perfect time to reveal themselves. The ships were not like anything humans had ever built. They were made of something that looked like crystal and light woven together. They hung in the sky without sound, without movement, casting shadows that stretched for miles. Jake Harrison was drinking his third cup of coffee when the call came. He was a commander in the United Earth Defense Force, a position that had seemed mostly ceremonial until that morning. He had spent 20 years in the military, fought in wars that now seemed small and pointless, and had been looking forward to retirement. But when the ships appeared, retirement became a distant dream. He arrived at the Geneva Command Center within hours. The building was chaos. Scientists were shouting at soldiers. Politicians were shouting at everyone. Screens showed footage from every corner of the world, all displaying the same impossible image. Crystal ships hanging in the sky like frozen tears. Dr. Emma Vaughn found him in the hallway. She was a small woman with dark hair and tired eyes. Jake had worked with her before on first contact protocols, back when first contact was just a theoretical exercise. Now it was real, and she looked as scared as he felt. "They sent a message," she said. "1 hour from now. They want to meet." "Where?" "Here. Geneva. They specifically asked for representatives of the entire human species." She paused. "Jake, they already know our languages. All of them. They have been watching us." The meeting took place in the main assembly hall. Jake stood at the front of the human delegation with Emma beside him. Behind them were scientists, diplomats, military officers, and religious leaders. The best humanity had to offer, gathered in one room to meet beings from another world. The Valanthi emissary arrived in a column of light. One moment the space was empty, and the next moment he was there. He was tall, perhaps 8 feet, with skin that shimmered like polished silver. His eyes were large and filled with a soft glow that changed color as he moved. He wore robes that seemed to be made of woven starlight. And when he spoke, his voice filled the room without effort. "I am Counselor Vorath of the Valanthi Dominion," he said. "We have watched your world for 300 of your years. We have studied your history, your cultures, your conflicts. We have come to make a determination about your species." Jake felt Emma tense beside him. He kept his own face calm, the way he had learned to do in combat situations. "Show nothing. Give nothing away." "We welcome you," Jake said. "Humanity has long wondered if we were alone in the universe. We are honored to finally have an answer." Vorath's glowing eyes moved across the assembled humans with an expression that Jake recognized. He had seen it before, on the faces of generals reviewing troops they considered beneath them. It was the look of someone who had already made up their mind. "You misunderstand the nature of this meeting," Vorath said. "We are not here to exchange greetings or establish relations. We are here to evaluate whether your species deserves to continue occupying this world." A murmur ran through the human delegation. Jake heard someone gasp. He forced himself to remain still. "The Valanthi Dominion has existed for 100,000 of your years," Vorath continued. "We have encountered many species. Some have been welcomed into the greater galactic community. Others have been deemed too dangerous, too primitive, or too destructive. Those species are relocated to reservation worlds, where they can exist without threatening the peace of the galaxy." Emma stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see her hands trembling slightly. "And what criteria do you use to make this determination?" Vorath turned his gaze to her. For a moment, something like curiosity flickered in his eyes. "We examine the species in question, their technology, their culture, their capacity for cooperation and growth. We have already gathered much data about humanity." He paused. "The results are not encouraging." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "You are a violent species," Vorath said. "Your history is written in blood. You have fought wars over land, over resources, over ideas. You have weapons capable of destroying your own world. You pollute your environment. You allow millions of your own kind to starve while others live in excess." His voice carried no anger, only a cold certainty. By every measure we use, humanity is a savage species. The word hung in the air. Savage. Jake felt it land like a blow to the chest. He thought of his own life, the wars he had fought, the things he had seen humans do to each other. Part of him wanted to argue, to defend his species, but another part of him wondered if the alien was right. However, Voreth continued, the Dominion believes in fairness. You will be given an opportunity to prove yourselves. A delegation of your choosing will be brought to our orbital station. There you will undergo a series of evaluations. If you demonstrate qualities that suggest potential for growth and civilization, you will be allowed to remain on your world under Dominion supervision. If you fail, your species will be relocated. How long do we have? Emma asked. One of your solar cycles, 1 year. Jake looked at Emma. Her face was pale, but her eyes were determined. He knew that look. She was already thinking, already planning. We accept, Jake said. We will prove that humanity is worth preserving. Voreth's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, though it held no warmth. Many species have said the same. None have succeeded in changing the Dominion's initial assessment. He raised one long-fingered hand. Prepare your delegation. We will return in 7 of your days to transport them to our station. The column of light appeared again, and Voreth was gone. The assembly hall erupted into chaos, but Jake barely heard it. He was looking at the sky through the tall windows, at the crystal ships that still hung there like a judgment waiting to fall. Emma touched his arm. Jake, we need to talk. There is something I have not told anyone yet. He looked at her. What is it? What? She glanced around at the panicking crowd, then pulled him toward a quiet corner. For the past 40 years, our radio telescopes have been picking up strange signals from deep space. Everyone thought it was just noise, background radiation. But my team has been analyzing it. Jake, it is not noise. It is language. Someone has been broadcasting a message across the entire galaxy for millions of years. The Valanthi? Emma shook her head. No. Something older. Something the Valanthi themselves might not understand. She met his eyes. I think I know how we can pass their test, but it is going to be the biggest gamble humanity has ever taken. Jake looked back at the sky, at the ships of the beings who had called his species savages. Then he looked at Emma, at the desperate hope in her eyes. Tell me everything, he said. The Valanthi station hung in orbit above Earth, like a second moon made of glass and light. It was enormous, large enough to hold a city inside its curved walls. Jake stood at the viewport of the transport ship and watched it grow larger as they approached. Behind him, the 11 other members of the human delegation sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Dr. Nathan Price was reviewing equations on his tablet. He was a physicist from California, a man who had spent his life studying the secrets of the universe. Now he was about to face beings who had unlocked those secrets thousands of years before humans learned to make fire. His hands were steady, but Jake could see the fear in his eyes. Lieutenant Grace Coleman sat perfectly still, her back straight, her gaze fixed on nothing. She was a tactical officer with a memory that could recall every detail of everything she had ever seen or heard. Jake had chosen her because he knew they would need someone who could remember every word the Valanthi said, every gesture they made. In a situation like this, details could mean the difference between survival and extinction. Emma sat beside Jake, her tablet clutched in her lap. She had spent the past week teaching him what she knew about the signals, the ancient language hidden in the static of the universe. He understood only a fraction of it, but he understood enough to know that it was their only hope. The transport ship docked with a soft vibration. The doors opened, and they stepped into the Valanthi station. It was like walking into a cathedral made of starlight. The walls curved upward into heights that disappeared into gentle mist. The floor beneath their feet was smooth and warm, and it seemed to pulse with a soft rhythm like a heartbeat. Everywhere Jake looked, he saw Valanthi moving with graceful purpose. They glanced at the humans with expressions of mild curiosity, the way a person might look at insects crawling across a sidewalk. Counselor Voreth was waiting for them, He led them through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked, until they reached a large circular chamber filled with strange devices and floating screens. "This is where your evaluation will take place," Vorath said. "You will be tested in several areas: mathematics, science, art, history, philosophy. The results of these tests will determine the fate of your species." The tests began immediately, and they were brutal. Nathan was given mathematical problems that made his head spin. The equations described things he could barely comprehend, concepts that bent the laws of physics in ways that should have been impossible. He worked through the first problem in 6 hours. The Volanthi observer noted that their children typically solved the same problem in minutes. Grace was shown recordings of Volanthi history, thousands of years compressed into hours of dense imagery and sound. She watched civilizations rise and fall, wars that spanned solar systems, peace treaties that lasted millennia. When she was asked to summarize what she had seen, the Volanthi seemed mildly impressed that she could remember any of it at all, but they made it clear that her understanding was shallow, like a child reciting words without knowing their meaning. The humans were shown Volanthi art, and it made them weep. Not from sadness, but from the sheer, overwhelming beauty of it. Music that used frequencies humans could not hear. Paintings that existed in dimensions they could not see. Stories told through manipulation of gravity itself. Narratives that unfolded across centuries. The humans sat in stunned silence, unable to respond. "You see now," Vorath said on the 3rd day of testing. "The gap between our civilizations is not one that can be bridged. You are children, and we are ancient. You are fumbling in darkness, and we have held the light for 100,000 years." Jake felt the anger rising in his chest, but he kept it contained. He had learned long ago that anger without purpose was useless. "Better to watch, to listen, to wait for the right moment. You judge us only by what we lack," Grace said. Her voice was calm and clear, cutting through the heavy air of the chamber. "You have shown us all the ways we fall short of your standards. But you have not asked what we might possess that you do not." Vorath turned to her with something that might have been amusement. "And what could a species barely 250,000 years old possess that we have not already discovered and surpassed?" Grace looked at Emma. A silent message passed between them. A decision made in the space of a heartbeat. Emma stepped forward, her tablet held before her like a shield. "We possess knowledge of the old words," Emma said. The chamber went silent. The floating screens flickered. The Volanthi observers, who had been watching with bored detachment, suddenly focused on Emma with an intensity that made Jake's skin crawl. Vorath's glowing eyes narrowed. "That is not possible. The old words are the language of the architects, the beings who created life in this galaxy before the first stars grew cold. No primitive species could know them." "And yet we do," Emma said. She touched her tablet, and a sound filled the chamber. It was not music, not speech, but something in between. It was a frequency that seemed to vibrate in Jake's bones, a pattern that felt older than time itself. The Volanthi reacted as if they had been struck. Some stepped backward. Others fell to their knees. Vorath stood frozen, his silver skin seeming to pale. "Where did you learn this?" he demanded, and for the first time, Jake heard something other than contempt in his voice. He heard fear. Emma stopped the recording. "We have been listening to the stars for over a century. We built machines to capture signals from deep space, hoping to find signs of intelligent life. We found something else instead. A message, buried in the cosmic background radiation, repeating endlessly across the entire galaxy. Everyone thought it was noise, but it was not noise. It was language." Nathan stepped forward, his earlier fear replaced by the excitement of a scientist presenting a discovery. "We have spent 40 years decoding it. We do not understand everything yet, but we understand enough to know that this is the language of your architects. And we believe we can read parts of it that you cannot." Vorath stared at them for a long moment. Then he turned and spoke rapidly to the other Volanthi, in a language that the translation devices did not convert. Jake watched their faces change, watched the arrogance crumble into uncertainty. Finally, Vorath turned back to the humans. You will demonstrate what you know. If this is a deception, you will be punished severely. But if what you say is true, then everything we believed about your species may need to be reconsidered. Jake felt Emma's hand find his and squeeze tightly. They had played their card, revealed their secret weapon. Now, they had to hope it was enough. We are ready, Emma said. Show us to wherever we need to go. Vorath nodded slowly. Follow me. I must summon the High Council. What you have claimed has not been claimed by any species in 50,000 years. The Council will want to witness this themselves. As they followed Vorath deeper into the station, Jake leaned close to Emma. Are you sure about this? If we cannot deliver what you promised, they will destroy us. Emma met his eyes, and in them, he saw the same desperate determination that had driven humanity to reach for the stars in the first place. We have no choice, Jake. This is our only chance to prove that we are more than they think we are. We have to show them that being young does not mean being worthless. Jake nodded and said nothing more. They walked in silence toward a future that would either save humanity or condemn it forever. The High Council chamber was the largest space Jake had ever seen inside a structure. The ceiling rose so high that clouds had formed near the top, soft white wisps that drifted slowly in currents of artificial air. The walls were lined with seats that curved upward in endless rows, and every seat was filled with Volanthi, thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands, their silver skin catching the light from sources that Jake could not identify. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform where the 12 humans now stood. Jake felt like an insect under a microscope, examined by countless glowing eyes that held curiosity, suspicion, and something that might have been hope. The eldest counselor sat at the highest point of the chamber, a female Volanthi whose skin had darkened to the color of old pewter with age. Her eyes burned with a deeper light than the others, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of millennia. I am Counselor Thessa, she said. I have led this council for 3,000 of your years. In that time, I have witnessed the evaluation of 112 species. 17 were welcomed into the galactic community. The rest were relocated. She paused, her ancient eyes fixed on Emma. You claim to know the old words. You claim that your primitive species, which has existed for less than a heartbeat in cosmic time, has decoded the language of the architects themselves. Do you understand the magnitude of what you are suggesting? Emma stepped forward. Her voice was small in the vastness of the chamber, but it did not waver. I understand, Counselor, and I stand by what I said. We have been receiving the architect's transmission for over a century. We have decoded significant portions of it. We believe we can share knowledge that your people have been seeking for 100,000 years. A murmur rolled through the assembled Volanthi like wind through grass. Thessa raised one hand, and silence fell instantly. Show us, she commanded. Emma nodded to Nathan, who activated a device they had brought from Earth. It was crude compared to Volanthi technology, a cobbled-together collection of receivers and processors that looked almost embarrassing in this chamber of wonders. But when it came to life, the sound that emerged made every Volanthi in the chamber go still. It was the same sound Emma had played for Vorath, but fuller now, richer. The frequencies layered upon each other, creating harmonics that seemed to resonate with the very structure of the station. Jake felt it in his teeth, in his spine, in some deep part of his brain that remembered things from before he was born. This is the raw signal, Emma explained, her voice cutting through the strange music. We detected it coming from every direction at once, embedded in the cosmic background radiation. At first, we thought it was interference from our own equipment, then we thought it was natural phenomenon. It took us 20 years to realize it was artificial, and another 20 to begin understanding what it meant. She touched the device, and the sound changed. Now it was cleaner, more structured. Patterns emerged, rhythms that repeated and evolved. The architects did not just create life in this galaxy, Emma continued. They left instructions, a message for their children, for all the species they seeded across the stars. The message has been playing continuously for at least 4 billion years, longer than Earth itself has existed. Counselor Thessa leaned forward. We know of this transmission. We have studied it for millennia. But the deeper layers have always eluded us. The architects encoded their most important messages in ways we cannot decipher. Because you were looking in the wrong place, Nathan said. He stepped up beside Emma, his earlier nervousness replaced by the confidence of someone who had finally found the piece that completed the puzzle. The architects designed the message with redundancy. The surface layer is readable by any species with sufficient technology, but the deeper layers require something else. They require a specific perspective, a way of thinking that the architects built into only certain species. What perspective? Thessa demanded. Grace answered. She had been standing quietly at the back of the human group, her perfect memory recording every word, every expression, every subtle shift in the chamber's atmosphere. Now she stepped forward, her voice clear and precise. The perspective of youth, she said. The perspective of struggle. The perspective of a species that has not yet forgotten what it means to fight for survival. The chamber erupted in murmurs again, louder this time. Jake saw expressions of disbelief, of anger, of confusion on the silver faces around them. But he also saw something else on a few faces. He saw recognition. You have been searching for the architect's deepest secrets among the oldest, most advanced civilizations, Grace continued. You assumed that wisdom comes only with age, that understanding comes only with power. But the architects knew something that you have forgotten. They knew that young species see things that old species cannot. They knew that struggle teaches lessons that comfort erases. Counselor Thessa was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more thoughtful. And what have you seen, young species? What have you decoded that we could not? Emma touched the device again. The sound shifted once more, and now words began to emerge. Not words in any human language, not words in any Valanthi tongue, but something more fundamental, concepts that transcended language, meanings that communicated directly to the mind. Jake felt them wash over him like waves. He saw images, felt emotions, understood ideas that he could never have put into words. He saw the architects themselves, beings of energy and light, who had lived and died before the galaxy took its current shape. He felt their love for the children they had created, their hope that one day all their scattered offspring would find each other and unite. And he saw coordinates, a location in space, a gathering point where the children were meant to come together, a place where the full legacy of the architects awaited, where the final piece of their message would be revealed. When the transmission ended, the chamber was utterly silent. Jake looked around and saw tears streaming down silver faces. He saw ancient beings who had lived for thousands of years looking at each other with expressions of wonder and disbelief. Counselor Thessa rose from her seat. Slowly, with the deliberate grace of someone who had witnessed the birth and death of stars, she descended from her high place and walked toward the platform where the humans stood. She stopped before Emma and looked down at her with eyes that seemed to hold entire universes. For 100,000 years, we have sought this knowledge, Thessa said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. We have conquered worlds, built empires, unlocked the secrets of matter and energy, and yet the one thing we wanted most remained beyond our reach. She reached out one long-fingered hand and gently touched Emma's cheek. You have given us what we could not find ourselves. You, whom we called savages, you, whom we thought unworthy of the stars. Emma stood frozen, uncertain how to respond to the touch of this ancient being. We want only to prove that humanity deserves a chance, she said. We want to show you that we are more than our worst moments. Thessa smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Jake had seen from any Valanthi since they had arrived. You have done more than prove yourselves, she said. You have reminded us of something we had forgotten. You have reminded us that the architects loved all their children, not just the oldest and strongest. She turned to face the assembled council. The evaluation of humanity is complete. I move that they be welcomed into the galactic community as full partners, not as subjects or wards, but as equals. Oh, the vote was unanimous. Jake felt Emma's hand find his again, and this time he held it tightly. Against all odds, Against the judgment of beings who had watched humanity crawl through its darkest chapters, they had won. They had spoken the language of gods, and the gods had listened. But as the celebration began around them, Jake could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The coordinates they had revealed pointed to a destination at the far edge of the galaxy, a journey that would take years, even with Valanthi technology. Whatever awaited them there, whatever legacy the architects had left behind, it would change everything. He looked at Emma and saw the same understanding in her eyes. The real test was still to come. The news of humanity's acceptance spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, messages began arriving from civilizations that humans had never heard of, species that had watched the evaluation with interest, and were now eager to make contact with the strange young race that had decoded the architect's secrets. But it was the Valanthi who changed the most. Jake noticed it in the way they looked at humans now. The contempt was gone, replaced by something more complex. There was respect, certainly, but also fear. He saw it in the way counselors stepped aside when Emma walked past. He saw it in the way scientists asked Nathan questions with a deference that bordered on reverence. The humans had not just passed a test. They had upended 100,000 years of Valanthi assumptions about the universe. Counselor Thessa summoned them to a private meeting 3 weeks after the revelation. Her chambers were simpler than Jake had expected, a modest space filled with artifacts from countless worlds. She sat on a cushion that molded itself to her form and gestured for the humans to sit across from her. "I have released our archives to your people," she said without preamble. "Every record we have collected about the architects. Every fragment of their message we have decoded over the millennia. It is all yours now." Nathan leaned forward eagerly. "With your permission, Counselor, we would like to begin analyzing the data immediately. If we combine your records with our own research, we might be able to decode even more of the message." Thessa nodded slowly. "That is what I wish to discuss with you. Our records are extensive, but they are also incomplete. We have spent 100,000 years gathering pieces of a puzzle, never quite understanding how they fit together." She paused, her ancient eyes moving across the human faces. "Your decodings fill gaps we never knew existed. When we overlay your interpretations onto our data, patterns emerge that we have never seen before." "What kind of patterns?" Emma asked. Thessa rose and moved to a device on the far wall. She touched it, and the room filled with a holographic display. Stars appeared, countless points of light representing the galaxy in miniature. Among them, certain stars glowed brighter, marked with symbols that Jake did not recognize. "These are the locations of every known artifact left by the architects," Thessa explained. "Structures, devices, messages encoded in the fabric of space itself. We have cataloged over 40,000 of them across the galaxy." She touched another control, and new patterns appeared. Lines connecting the marked stars, forming shapes that seemed almost organic. "When we apply your decodings, we see this. A network." The architects did not scatter their legacy randomly. They created a system, a connected web of knowledge that spans the entire galaxy. Grace stood and walked closer to the display, her eyes moving rapidly across the patterns. "It looks almost like a neural network," she said. "Like a brain made of stars." "An apt comparison," Thessa said. "We believe the architects intended for their children to eventually connect these nodes, to activate the network and receive whatever knowledge lies at its heart." "And the coordinates we decoded," Jake said. "The gathering point. Is it part of this network?" Thessa zoomed the display toward the edge of the galaxy, to a region of space that appeared dark and empty. But as she enhanced the image, Jake saw that it was not empty at all. There was something there. Something that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. "This is the destination your decodings revealed. We call it the void point. Our long-range sensors detect a massive structure there. Something that dwarfs anything we have ever built. We believe it is the central node of the network, the place where all the pieces come together." Emma stared at the dark shape on the display. "Has anyone ever traveled there?" "Many have tried over the millennia. None have returned." Thessa's voice was heavy with the weight of lost expeditions. Of ships, that had vanished into the darkness. The architects left guardians to protect their legacy. We do not know what form these guardians take, but we know that they are effective. Then how are we supposed to reach it? Nathan asked. Thessa turned to face them, and for the first time, Jake saw uncertainty in her ancient eyes. We do not know. But we believe that the answer lies in the deeper layers of the message. The layers that only you have been able to decode. The architects built their guardians to keep out those who were not ready. Perhaps they also built a key for those who were. The implications settled over Jake like a heavy blanket. Humanity had not just earned a place among the stars, they had inherited a responsibility. A task that older civilizations had failed to complete for 100,000 years. You want us to find the key, he said. You want us to open the door that you could never open. Thessa nodded. You have already proven that you can see what we cannot. You understand the architects in ways that we do not. We are asking you to continue what you have started. Complete the decoding. Find the key. Lead us to the legacy that the architects left for all their children. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Jake watched her face, saw the thoughts moving behind her eyes. Finally, she spoke. This is not a decision we can make alone. We need to consult with our people, with our governments, with the scientists who have been working on the decoding for decades. Of course, Thessa said. We would expect nothing less. But know this. Humans. Time is not unlimited. The network has begun to activate. Our sensors have detected increased energy flows between the nodes, patterns that we have never seen before. Something is waking up, something that has slept since before the Valanthi rose from their homeworld. Whatever the architects intended, it is beginning now. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? Something is waking up? Thessa touched the display again. The view shifted to show one of the marked stars, a node in the architect's network. As Jake watched, the node pulsed with light. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it went dark. 3 days ago, this node went silent. It had been transmitting continuously for billions of years. Now it is dead. She showed them another node. Then another. The same thing is happening across the galaxy. The network is shutting down, node by node. We do not know why, and we do not know how to stop it. How long? Emma asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. At the current rate, all the nodes will be dark within 5 of your years. And when the last node falls silent, we believe the void point will seal itself forever. Whatever the architects wanted their children to inherit will be lost for eternity. The humans looked at each other in silence. They had come to the stars hoping only to prove that they deserved to exist. Now they found themselves at the center of a mystery that could determine the fate of every species in the galaxy. Jake thought about Earth, about the billions of people who were just beginning to understand that they were not alone in the universe. They had no idea what was being asked of their species. They had no idea that the fate of the galaxy might rest on the shoulders of a race that had been called savages just weeks ago. We need to move fast, he said finally. Send us back to Earth. We have work to do. Thessa bowed her head. A gesture of respect that Jake had never seen a Valanthi offer to anyone. Go with the blessing of the Dominion, humans. And may the architects guide your path. As they left the chamber, Jake felt the weight of the galaxy settling onto his shoulders. Somewhere out in the darkness, something ancient was stirring. And somehow, impossibly, humanity was the key to understanding it. The savages had become the hope of the stars. The ship was called the Horizon's Edge, and it was the greatest vessel ever built by human and Valanthi hands working together. It had taken 8 months to construct. 8 months of desperate work while the architect's network continued to go dark, node by node, across the galaxy. Now it hung in orbit above Earth, a sleek shape of crystal and steel that represented the best of 2 civilizations. Jake stood on the observation deck, watching his homeworld shrink behind them as the ship began its long journey toward the void point. The blue marble that had been humanity's only home for 250,000 years grew smaller and smaller, until it was just another point of light among billions. Emma joined him at the viewport, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. The Volanthi crew had been baffled by the human obsession with the bitter drink, but they had installed a machine to make it anyway. Small gestures of respect had become common between the species over the past months. "The final calculations are done," Emma said, handing him a cup. "We found the key." Jake took the coffee and felt its warmth spread through his fingers. "Are you certain?" "As certain as we can be." Emma leaned against the railing and looked out at the stars. The architects designed their guardians to test any species that approached the void point, not to destroy them, but to verify that they were ready. The tests are built into the network itself, into the message they have been broadcasting for billions of years. "And we passed the tests?" Emma smiled, but there was a weight behind her eyes that had not been there when this all began. "We passed because we listened, because we did not assume we already knew the answers, because we approached the message with humility instead of arrogance." She paused. "The Volanthi are brilliant, Jake. They have technology that makes ours look like stone tools. But they made a mistake that young species do not make. They assumed that their way of understanding was the only way. They stopped questioning. They stopped wondering if maybe they were missing something." Jake thought about that. He thought about all the times in human history when certainty had led to catastrophe. When people had been so sure they were right that they closed their minds to any other possibility. "Is that what the architects wanted?" he asked. "Species that still knew how to wonder?" I think so. I think they understood that wisdom is not just about accumulating knowledge. It is about remaining open to new knowledge, even knowledge that contradicts everything you believe." Emma sipped her coffee. "The Volanthi forgot that. They became so advanced that they stopped growing. They preserved what they had, instead of reaching for what they did not have." The ship hummed around them as it accelerated toward the edge of the galaxy. The journey would take 3 years, even with Volanthi, faster than light technology. 3 years of travel through uncharted space, toward a destination that had claimed every expedition sent before them. But this expedition was different. This expedition carried the key. Grace found them an hour later. She was carrying a data tablet, and her face wore an expression that Jake had learned to recognize over the past months. It was the look she got when she had discovered something important. "The network is responding to us," she said. "As we pass each node, it activates. The shutdown has stopped." Jake and Emma exchanged glances. "What do you mean, activates?" "The nodes we pass are coming back online. They are linking to our ship, to the transmission we are broadcasting. It is like the network recognizes us." Grace held up the tablet. "Look at this. Energy levels across the entire network have increased by 30% since we launched. Whatever was happening, whatever was shutting everything down, it has stopped." Emma took the tablet and studied the data. Her eyes widened. "The architects programmed the network to degrade if no species completed the journey to the void point within a certain time frame. It was a deadline, Jake. A test of whether their children would ever find each other and work together. And our expedition reset the clock? More than that. Our expedition proved that the test was complete. The architects were waiting for a species that could decode their message and unite the others. They were waiting for exactly what is happening right now. Humans and Volanthi, working together, sharing knowledge, heading toward the legacy that was meant for all of us." The years passed. Jake grew older on the ship, his hair turning gray, lines deepening around his eyes. But he did not regret a single day of the journey. He learned the Volanthi language, studied their history, formed friendships with beings who had been alive when humanity was still learning to farm. And in return, he taught them about Earth, about human music and art and literature, about the struggles that had shaped his species, the wars and the famines and the moments of transcendent hope. Nathan spent the years working with Volanthi scientists to decode more of the architect's message. Each new revelation added to their understanding of what awaited them. The void point was not just a repository of knowledge, it was a seed, a beginning, a tool that could transform the galaxy itself. Grace documented everything, her perfect memory recording every moment of the journey for the history books that would one day be written about this voyage. And Emma kept decoding, kept listening, kept wondering. On the final day of their journey, Jake stood on the bridge as the void point came into view. It was vast beyond comprehension, a structure that could have swallowed stars. It was black as the space around it. But it was not empty. Jake could feel it. A presence that was ancient and patient, and infinitely kind. The Guardians appeared, shapes of light that surrounded the ship like curious children greeting long-awaited guests. They did not attack. They did not test. They simply watched, as the horizon's edge approached the entrance to the architect's legacy. Emma stepped forward and spoke in the old words, the language that had taken humanity 40 years to learn and 100,000 years for the Valanthi to give up on. The Guardians listened. Then they parted, opening a path into the heart of the structure. What they found inside changed everything. The architects had not left just knowledge. They had left themselves, preserved in forms that transcended matter and energy. They had been waiting for their children to mature, to find each other, to prove that life in the galaxy could overcome its differences and work toward a common purpose. And now that their children had arrived, the architects were ready to teach them. Jake stood in the center of that ancient chamber, surrounded by the light of beings who had shaped the galaxy itself, and he thought about the moment when Vorath had first called humanity savages. He thought about the fear, the anger, the desperate hope that had driven them to reveal their secret. He thought about all the ways that journey could have ended in tragedy, but it had not ended in tragedy. It had ended here, in a room filled with light, where the children of the stars finally met the parents who had loved them from the beginning. Emma took his hand. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she was smiling. "They called us savages," she said softly. Jake nodded. "And now we speak the language of their gods." Around them, the architects began to teach, and the galaxy would never be the same. The end.